Start recording. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Cindy, and thanks to everybody for joining. So excited to be in front of you and here today. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, I'm not going to take very much time, but wanted to introduce myself. I'm Gale Wilkinson, and I started Vitalize in 2018. We are an early stage WorkTech fund. All we invest in is WorkTech, and we define that in 3 ways. One is enterprise software that transforms workflows. So there's a lot in this bucket. It's horizontal and vertical applications that use data and AI to truly transform how work outcomes happen. The second is traditional HR tech. So that's hiring, L&D, engagement, and retention. And then finally, we're very bullish on the freelance economy. And so we power some infrastructure there as well. So obviously, we don't have to tell you guys about this, but WorkTech is a huge and growing space. We are one of the very few funds that focus just in this area. And we do it because we love it. I've started a couple businesses in it before. And if you look at the 125 deals that our team has done historically, many are in this space. About our fund, we invest at the seed stage, and there are a couple of things that make us unique. The first is that we really value people. So we have a couple of communities that I want to highlight. The first is called Vitalize Angels. So when we see deals that are too early for our seed fund, we have about 500 people in this group that can write checks as low as $1,000. And we really focus on bringing people to the table. So we have a lot of first-time check writers. We can even have people who are not accredited in the group, which means that about 2/3 are underrepresented check writers. We also really focus a lot on marketing and social media, so we have a huge following there. And finally, we have a venture partner program, which is relatively new, but we have a lot of CHROs, CPOs, future work experts. I know one of you is on this call, so I hope a few others might be interested in joining us, and I'd be happy to share more about that in the future. Small but mighty team, there's 3 of us. And then my last slide is this. So historically, we've deployed about $70 million. We have really strong performance. I just want to walk through a couple of the companies in our portfolio so you get an idea of what we invest in. The first is the Mom Project, which is the hiring marketplace for moms as they re-enter the workforce. Shaylee is the founder of Elevate K-12. This is a future of work platform for teachers. Noam started Placer.ai. It's a location-based analytics platform for real estate, private equity, and retailers. Dr. Christine started a platform for cybersecurity experts. And then finally, Nick founded a company called WorkMade, which helps freelancers to do their taxes, which is obviously a huge problem. So we have 2 companies here today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Vince is going to go ahead and share his screen. While he does, I will introduce why we invested in Sparkwise. So if you remember, Vitalize invests in 3 areas, and the second is HR tech. Part of that is L&D, and I had been searching for a completely productized learning and development solution because everything that I've seen always has people as teachers, and that's not scalable. So Vince's solution was so awesome that I committed right on the phone with him to take his last $300K in the round, and excited for Vince to walk you through his product.
Thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. Really great to meet you. Let me share my screen to make sure that you can see it. Is it showing now? Okay, great. So I'm Vince. I am co-founder and CEO of Sparkwise. We are a multiplayer skill building platform for teams. Our founding team has years of experience transforming organizations and building L&D programs at McKinsey, and also building active collaborative educational platforms at Minerva and other startups. And we're passionate about people and about learning, and we're using everything we've learned over the years to build a learning platform that hopefully makes a real difference in people's lives and careers. So the core problem that we're solving is that true upskilling is really hard to deliver. Upskilling has a higher bar. It's about driving behavior change and business impact. It's not just a check the box training exercise. It's about equipping people with better judgment and giving them versus giving them information they need to simply recall. And what this means is that upskilling requires deliberate practice, not just exposure to passive content. But this is very hard because learning easily falls out of people's busy day-to-day priorities, and the rise of distributed teams makes this kind of practice even harder. And we all know the host of performance and culture issues that arise when you don't have a way to upskill the organization effectively. Of course, new hires don't ramp up fast because they're missing core skills. New managers struggle to lead and create high-performing teams. Performance issues linger on cycle after cycle. This creates frustration and some finger pointing among executive teams and often leads to tension between business and HR. And finally, employees feel stagnant without continued development, they leave. As Gale mentioned, alluded to a bit, conventional L&D tools don't enable HR leaders to upskill organizations at scale. If you solve for scale, you end up with either giving employees the typical click e-learning software or running massive webinars that people frankly find boring and disengaging. Or you solve for impact, and you need an army of facilitators or coaches to lead the live group sessions, which don't scale. We saw a need for a solution that is both scalable and impactful, and that's a gap we're trying to fill with Sparkwise. We've turned interactive, team-based learning into software that requires no live instructors. I'll give you a real demo in a couple of minutes, but in a nutshell, our core differentiators are threefold. One, participants learn by solving multiplayer challenges in real time, fully guided by our platform. The group work makes it fun, insightful, and creates accountability for one another to learn and push the discussion. Two, our sessions focus on active learning and not passive content consumption. And we reinforce our learnings with spaced reminders sent to both the participants and their managers with coaching tips afterwards. And three, because our technology doesn't require live instructors, you can schedule these live group learning sessions anytime for any teams and repeat for any time zones. With Sparkwise, you can give many more employees the social learning experience they love that's for real-time practice, feedback, and human connection, while eliminating the cost and coordination barrier of typical high-impact facilitated group training. And as a leader, you can build your own learning programs in our interactive group format so that you can deliver your own content to any time, any team with zero scheduling hassle. Or you have an option to just pick from our growing library of skills. We have 100+ business skills such as communication, leadership, problem solving, project management, and more, and we're building out based on client demand. And we have thousands of leaders from all types of organizations across sectors and geographies that are using Sparkwise to elevate their teams with exceptional learner feedback. So without further ado, let me quickly show you what the actual platform itself looks like. So each Sparkwise session is called an immersion. It typically lasts an hour. If you're a participant, you get a calendar invite to the scheduled immersion. And when the time comes, you log into our group learning platform at the start of the session that looks like this. So what I'm about to show you is an example immersion we have on executive level communication. It's one of our most popular ones that most companies actually just embed into their onboarding for any new hires. So when you enter, usually there's a quick intro video, and then participants join actual live video on our platform. And so you will be now with small groups of 2 to 5 people over video. And the idea is that you will be working through the experience together step by step. As I mentioned, this is not a passive environment where you just click through content and sort of watch someone lecture. Instead, the platform guides everyone to collaborate in real time. The way it does it is with facilitated prompts and clear UX, as well as very active-oriented pedagogy. Let me walk you through how the learning science and interface actually comes together in this sort of example module. So once people join, the first activity we ask people to do is a group work where this is a collaborative whiteboard where if you were to type as another participant, I would be able to see it. And you have 4 minutes, as you see on the timer here, to sort of discuss the motivation behind this topic, which is what makes people not able to communicate concisely in the workplace. At the end of the 4 minutes, we say, okay, well, here are some of the reasons why people might struggle to be concise. And we will teach you a different way to communicate that's much more effective in the workplace. We usually try to distill the core tactic or skill people should learn in the session in a quick video or a visual. In this case, we call it leading with the answer. You know, you really want to start with your main idea and then follow up with examples, not the other way around. And we want people to really get real practice on that on a realistic work scenario. So in this case, people get to be this project manager reporting to their CEO on a progress. And now you're going to get to practice the skill in a lot of different ways. The first kind of activity we ask people to do is a solo step where they first of all have a lot of these details and they're able to work through on the right here how they might restructure the details to be much more suitable for reporting to their CEO. And after 5 minutes of solo work, you go to the next step. And the platform makes it very easy for everyone to see each other's answer and give real-time feedback on how different people approach the same problem, followed by a sample answer that tells you, well, this is what great looks like, and allows people to see the gap between what they worked on and what sort of expert view looks like. In the next step, we give them yet another exercise. This time, we have a pretty so poorly written email, but an email format that you actually often see in new hires that might not actually often lead with the answer. And you have the opportunity on your own to edit this email to be much more answer first. And in the next step, this time the platform makes it very easy to see side by side what everyone worked on. And again, spur discussions on what you like about each other's answers. And then we once again show the sample answer that shows what good looks like. This is usually a moment where people really see what great, pithy, well-structured email looks like and the difference between what they crafted versus not. And what you're seeing pedagogically, just to highlight, is we don't just tell people, hey, here's what to do and just apply it. We actually let people grapple with it and struggle a little bit in a way that opens up their minds to what the real gap is in their skill set. We have yet another exercise in this case where we actually give them a bunch of different statements and ask them to pull out the governing thought. What you're seeing is we let the skill set we want to teach be practiced in different ways such that really sticks even beyond the session. Typically, we have a quick video near the end that synthesizes the takeaways, and we also allow people to have open, personal conversations, making the actual skill that they acquired real to their own life and to their day-to-day work. And we end with what we call a memento, where people journal their thoughts, and we send what they've learned, the summary of the learning, as well as their reflections back to them as a reminder. And we also send their managers summary of the insight that they've learned and coaching tips. And the goal there is that you actually reinforce the learning in multiple angles, even after the session. Let me highlight just a few more things, and I'll open up for any questions or next steps. So a couple of testimonials from our clients. So Juala here is a CMO who brought Sparkwise in to train her full department. And for her, she wanted to help them improve executive level communication, problem solving, meeting management, and other business skills. And she says she's seen big changes that even her peers at the executive level comment on. Ian is a people-driven healthcare startup leader where his staff's engagement and performance is the #1 driver of success of their patients and their company. And he actually used Sparkwise's existing modules to train business skills and are also building company-specific sessions on their clinical delivery model to ensure that everyone really understands how clinical delivery should work in their startup. And of course, here's some feedback from the learners themselves. With Sparkwise, training is something busy professionals love and not dread. And participants uniformly rave about how exciting and useful it is to learn in informal small groups in real time in small 1-hour chunks. Our platform can flexibly support any new or existing L&D programs, ranges from on-demand skills training to new hire boot camps to new manager trainings to even customer education. We can be a standalone solution. We can complement existing programs and just plug in as pieces. And so we work with our different clients in many different ways to ensure that it works with their existing L&D priorities. To end, as a society, we're facing an unprecedented capability crisis. As we all know, AI is taking more and more share of human work as it's defined today. And we need a new way for people to learn, grow, and adapt for life, while fostering human connection that preserves humanity in an increasingly automated workplace. And that's the work we're doing at Sparkwise. As a quick recap, we're a multiplayer skill building platform that immerses teams in interactive group challenges for real-time practice, discussions, and feedback. Because our sessions don't require live instructors and are done in small groups, we make it way easier to schedule and reschedule with flexibility. And third, you can build your own learning programs or use our existing library of 100+ skills to support your L&D priorities. I'm happy to chat if you want to learn more. Also happy to offer your team a free trial session. If you would like to really see it in action, you can either drop your email name in the chat or in the follow-up survey, and I'll follow up, or email me directly as well. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'd love for folks to think about questions that you have. I have one to kick us off, Vince. Can you talk to us a little bit about the data that is shared with the participants who go through the training, as well as the data that is shared with their manager and the executive team?
Yeah. And maybe I should stop sharing the screen so people can see each other's faces. With the participants themselves, there are a number of data that we share back. So one is stuff that they actually worked on, as well as the reflections they have. We are able to share summaries of those after the session, so we can really reinforce their learning. And as well as any kind of their actual reflections on how effective the training itself was, of course. And for the managers themselves as well, we are able to share what people thought, what people took away from the actual sessions, as well as, of course, the basic, completion, attendance, post-session reflection kinds of metrics. Actually, where we're moving is maybe it's also worth highlighting. As you saw, it's a very structured environment where every session people go through the same set of steps. And we as a platform can measure a lot more granular metrics on how people engaged, what they said, what they wrote, what the conversation felt like, in a way that can really help surface what is the level of efficacy of the actual training and what are people taking away. And we're working on how to make those kinds of data in a format that really informs the leaders on how well their skill building programs are working.
Rick, do you want to ask your question? I can read it out loud. What is the research supporting the content you provide on best practice sample answers?
Yeah. So there are actually a sort of number of inputs into the content that we've developed and also what we're moving with the platform. So with the content that we've developed, we have a sort of a group of learning experts who so far have come from either they were former consultants at McKinsey or other sort of executives from other programs like Google or executive leadership programs that have informed the content we've built to date. But I would say a big part of it just comes from the fact that me and my co-founder have led and developed a lot of training programs back at McKinsey and actually just learned a lot of this skill on the job. And it was really about translating what we learned through the job into formats that can be easily taken away. With that said, we as a company are on a journey from creating content ourselves to actually really becoming a platform that enables other organizations with distinctive expertise to build learning content on their own. So the way we think about it is we want to partner with whichever organizations really, cream of the crop in the content area and help them take their content and build it on our platform and distribute it to the right learners.
Thank you, Vince.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. And feel free to raise your hand if you want to ask your question. Otherwise, I will read from the chat. So I see Sharon's hand up. She'll ask first, and then I can ask Betty's question. So Sharon.
My question is this a standalone application, or does it have data feeds from ERP systems such as SAP or Oracle to populate, who's eligible, track their training in a learning management system, or is this meant to be a standalone system?
Today, it very much works like a standalone system, but we actually work with different companies that have large systems to figure out the right linkage points between their existing platform and ours to ensure that you can really manage some of these sessions on your own LMS. So you can use it in both ways, I would say. Should I answer Betty's question? I see in the chat.
Betty says each company believes it is unique. This is where an organization can get really bogged down. Could you talk about the build your own?
Yeah, so I can give you some examples. Actually, maybe the best way to explain is give examples of how we work with different organizations to build their own content. So these companies usually come in two formats. Either the company has already developed a lot of training content themselves, but that's delivered in either in a live format or in a video format, and they want to turn into team-based. Or they have nothing pre-built, want to build it from scratch. In the first case, we take the content from them and we actually suggest, hey, if you were to reimagine this in this team-based format with a different pedagogy, this is what this would look like. So we would marry their distinctive expertise with our own pedagogical view, and we will actually build out content together in that way. In the case where they actually have no content built, we ask who are your highest performers who have the insights that you want to instill into the organization. So who does their job extremely well, and let us talk to them. And we help distill the practices that are happening in the workplace that you want to drive to the rest of the organization, and then turn those into these interactive sessions.
Paulette.
Hello. So what does the data, I'm interested in what the data looks like on the back end. So me as an employer, if I deployed your software to my team, what is it that I see on the back end? And the reason I ask this question is because we've worked with a lot of early stage tech companies.
Yeah.
And on the back end, it looks like a bunch of letters and numbers, and it's not very succinct in the data that we receive that we really need in order to evaluate what's going on inside of our organization so that we can make adjustments going forward. So what does that, is there a dashboard? If there is a dashboard, what does that look like, and what kind of information does it give us?
Yeah, great question. And I would say dashboard is an area we're continuously iterating and evolving. Today, we have a standard dashboard that we give to all of our customers. It has a few like most critical information that people have asked us for. One is very, very clearly who has attended what training, right? Like what's the attendance rate? What's the actual satisfaction from those sessions? And what are upcoming sessions that people haven't attended? And then secondly is qualitatively, like what have people said about different sessions they've actually attended? So today we focus on those feedback, and we use that to have discussions with our clients regularly on what's working, what can we do differently, and make continuous improvement. But as I mentioned before, where we actually want to really differentiate ourselves in the data is beyond the metrics that I just shared with you. Every training company likely provides you in some format. I think what we really want to provide is much more granular view into what the level of engagement was like in the session, because the very structured environment that people are going through in a way that gives you more insight to what's working and what can be improved.
And I'll ask a follow-up question. So when we get that data, does that data include, because I would be very interested in knowing what are the trends that are happening across my organization. Is when groups are working on this thing, how many of them are getting the same results so that I can identify, like I want to be able to identify what we're doing really great, where we have opportunities for improvement, and what are our total blind spots that they're just like, they're missing. That 4-minute clock goes out and they haven't filled in all the answers. Is that part of the data we receive now in the dashboard, or is that something that would come in the future?
I think they're pieces of it, but we don't have the full picture that you're describing here, and I think it's a really great use case you're highlighting. The reason why I say we have pieces of it is that we've looked at so our sessions are very granular. Every hour-long session is a very granular set of skills, examples, how to give impactful feedback, how to address team issues, how to manage your time, right? So it's actually from a our catalog almost has its own skill taxonomy, and we've used it to have conversations with leaders who purchase us and say, hey, these are the things that are really resonating or people find really insightful. And it's an insightful view into what are the kinds of topics that feel like it's the biggest gap in the organization, as well as who are the groups of people that are very engaged in these topics. So we are able to imply some of the things that you're saying, but I think we have an opportunity to make the data a lot more explicit to answer the questions that you just raised.
Okay, we're going to do these last 4 questions, and then we're going to switch over to Aaron after we get through them. So Rick's question is, does your team consult with clients in developing best practice research-based learning content?
Yeah, I think, Rick, I think I might have addressed this a little bit in my previous answer, but was there any follow-up there that I can?
No, I think you did answer it.
Okay, great. And then Erica's question, how are employees assigned to classes? Very, very flexible, and we help the clients figure out the best way for this. So certain clients want everyone to build a core set of skills. So it's actually much more of an assigned set of series that a cohort goes through. Other clients want it to be, hey, here's a catalog and let people tell us which ones they want. And as the right groups form, they get formulated into sessions. So a lot of flexibility and assignment, although I would say typically most clients do at least the curation of the series in a way that doesn't put the whole onus of selection on the employees. In terms of whether they stay with the same group or not, we actually often recommend switching up the groups. People really love the opportunity to work with people they don't normally work with and get new insight. And in fact, a lot of clients use this as a team building exercise in ways like that break silos across functions and don't work with each other. I think
Emily, I can read
yeah.
it. Emily asks, what piece of customer feedback have you received that you are focused on improving?
Yeah, this is a really great question. There are multiple levels of feedback that we act on. One is, of course, let me go from the most broad to maybe most granular. The most broad are, of course, conversations we have with the leaders or with learners on a regular basis. And the questions that we ask is, are you seeing impact? How? And usually most leaders tell us the way that I see impact in these skills that are kind of hard to measure impact, right? Oftentimes is people use the skills that was practiced in meetings and actually use it to change how they think. So the change in the way people speak and use the toolkit is how they see it play out in the workplace. And that gives us confidence that, oh, these sessions are landing versus, oh, maybe these sessions aren't landing. The second level is, of course, the post-session surveys that learners fill out that gives us insight very immediately, like what was confusing about them, or did this land, or was this not as engaging as usual? And the third is to actually watch videos of the sessions that people have gone through. And there we really see, especially when we launch new sessions or new content, where are people getting confused? Are people actually landing on the insights that we think they should be landing? Are they spending the right amount of time that we intended to, or is this too short, too long? We optimize our sessions once it's launched through live feedback in a way that they consistently land once they're optimized.
All right, and Eric's got the last question for Vince.
Yeah, mine was just more, first of all, I really like the engagement side of this, Vince, and I like the scalability of what you all are doing here. You know, let's take communications as an example. You go through it, for sure, you can see where the engagement plays in. You can certainly see where the individual that goes through it can report and echo back how engaged they felt it was. But, you know, like the holy grail on these things is, you know, when they leave 30 days later, what impact has it really had? Is there anything maybe in subsequent modules on communication, if we take that as a thread, that allows in any way, shape, or form for us to see, is there a progression in their proficiency, right? So in other words, does the engagement of the session stick? Does it really get integrated when they go back and they get into the real environment?
Yeah. I think this is an unsolved problem of corporate training in general,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
but I think it's a really important one. I actually would think about this in two different ways. One is like, at least at our company, we ask two things. One is, do we believe it's having impact? And second is, can we measure it? They're similar, but they're actually a bit different too, right? So in terms of, do we believe it's having impact? The best way we can get at it today as a company is, as I mentioned, have conversations with clients. Like, are you seeing changes? And we've actually had cases of clients that said, hey, a year later, people actually remember the session, even the scenario that was used. And we use like leading with the answer is a terminology we use constantly in meetings. So there are these kinds of anecdotal evidence that gives us confidence that once people actually have had to engage for an hour, like practicing multiple times, the learning science does hold, right? That through active learning, the retention is much higher. Now, the question that you ask is, can we measure it and demonstrate it with metrics? I am not, frankly, able to say that we've really cracked the nut yet. I think we'll want to, as I mentioned, take advantage of the richer data we have from our sessions, whether it be what are people saying, what are languages that people are using in these sessions in a way that we can analyze, like, is the vocabulary really being instilled into people's language, or be able to assess the outputs that they actually work on. But frankly, we as a platform aren't quite there yet to be able to then use it as a way to prove proficiency gain.
Yeah, listen, again, kudos on the engagement and really this type of approach. I mean, what we found is, even if it's not a silver bullet, it is a huge platform for democratizing learning, because it's anywhere, anytime type of learning that can happen. And the fact that you coordinate it so that you can get like groups to come together also makes a ton of sense. So hats off on I think the core idea that you have here.
Thank you very much. And thank you for great questions. I think there's one more, but I also know we have to.
You can answer it fast.
Okay. We actually have, they don't do the exact same module, but we have levels of similar competencies in a way that actually people can do more advanced versions as they progress.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Vince, for that. So we're going to transition over to Aaron and do the same format where he's going to give us a quick 10-minute product pitch. And then I'll ask maybe a question to kick us off and go to you also, make sure you get your questions answered. I'm also going to be sharing a link right now in the chat, and that is a quick survey. So if you're interested in talking with Vince or trying out his software, or talking with Aaron or trying out his software, or getting more information on Vitalize, would welcome any of that. And so quick introduction on Aaron. We had been looking for a company that does what he does. And this group that I mentioned called Vitalize Venture Partners, we meet quarterly, and we want to understand themes that HR and executives are thinking about. And we know that Aaron is hitting on 3 of those, which are the hybrid workforce and AI and engagement and retention. And when we understood what he was seeking to do, we knew that there was going to be magic. And hold on, Aaron's coming back in. We knew that there was going to be magic in terms of what Aaron would be able to do in terms of improving outcomes and saving time for individual employees, for their managers, and then also for the broader organization. So I had to beg Aaron to let us into his round, which he did let us do, because it's just so core to what we have been looking for at Vitalize. So Aaron, please, over to you, and we're excited to see your product pitch.
That's awesome. Yeah, excited to share it. If Vince, if you could give me screen sharing rights again. I got booted by Zoom and just came back and lost all my privileges. So I need to be reinstated. In the meantime, I'll just say, hi, I'm Aaron. I'm the founder of Supermanage, and started thinking and working in this area. I wrote a book in 2019 called Brave New Work, which was really about the future of work and how we got where we've ended up. And ever since then, I've been thinking about how to scale what we've learned about what work can be. How can it be more human, more adaptive, more empowered, all those things. And so that gave birth to Supermanage. So let me just pop over here and tell you the story. Hopefully you can see my first slide, if that worked. Lovely. Awesome. So Supermanage sits at the intersection of management and AI, and we start with management. So as you all know, managing people is incredibly hard. Possibly one of the hardest things that we have to do at work is really deal with the fact that we have a massive variety of complex human beings with different histories and different futures and plans. And how do we get people to do the best work of their lives, which is really why I get out of bed every day. I want to help people do the best work of their lives when they come in and work with me. And I hope that other managers feel the same way. Unfortunately, the reality is that, you know, management is hard, and it kind of has this key moment, this apex moment when you talk to managers about where do they do the activities of management? Where do they actually guide people? Where do they mentor? Where do they solve problems? Where do they lead? Often you hear one-on-ones. We spend something like 10 to 30% of a given week in one-on-ones, depending on whether you do skip levels or not and how long your one-on-ones last. And they seem to make the difference. That's kind of where we sink or swim as managers. There's lots of other places and ways that we create the environment around folks and build and develop teams. But if your one-on-ones are fantastic, chances are you're a well-loved manager and you have high retention. If your one-on-ones don't happen or are terrible, the opposite, right? And the reality is that few managers and few ICs or team members really seize the opportunity of the one-on-one. Managers generally fail to prepare. They just don't have time, and they show up late or not at all. Direct reports and ICs can kind of feel when they're not the priority. They might hesitate to share what's really going on with them for a variety of reasons around psych safety or politics. And then eventually, as Vince talked about, when they feel like they're not developing anymore, they look for greener pastures. And of course, all of our companies then are left with holding the bag on retention issues, manager development kind of not happening or being stagnant, and even the inability to cascade messages or things that matter through their conversations that happen in these one-on-ones, these sort of the heartbeat of the organization in some way. So that's kind of where we come in. The starting place for this product is actually just with Slack, although we have a roadmap that includes Teams and Notion and Outlook and all the other wonderful things that people want to get data from. And the idea is that you plug Supermanage into the places where you work, and the AI starts to do some interesting things with that data. Essentially, what we're able to do is take the feed of all the data that's happened since your last one-on-one, and in about 5 seconds, which I'll show you in a moment, compress all that into a very short brief for both the manager and the employee that talks about what have been the contributions since the last time we met? What are some of the challenges that are surfacing? What does overall engagement and sentiment look like? And what are some suggested topics for that meeting? Obviously, when you talk to great managers, they always say it's their meeting, but it's not every time that the direct report shows up ready to have a great conversation or even knowing what they want to talk about. So those suggested topics provide a little bit of structure for a great conversation, which we think makes the difference. The way it works is that essentially all the content that comes out of Slack and then eventually all those other applications that I just talked about are fed into Supermanage, and that data is processed through a few layers of analysis using ChatGPT-4, ChatGPT-3, and a couple other LLMs that you may or may not know, like Anthropic. We can talk about that. And then it generates that snapshot. This can be done on the schedule with the one-on-one. So like, hey, it's an hour before your meeting or 24 hours before your meeting. Here's the brief. Or it can be done on the fly, which is what we'll do today. So I just am curious. Maybe I'm just back from vacation. I want to know what Vince has been up to. I'm gonna punch that in and find out. So that's what this looks like here. And the brief itself, we'll actually look at a real one, but it essentially comes across a transom like this, a series of key bullet points based on these sections. We actually have an overview now as well at the top. So if you really are pressed for time, there's a TLDR, but what have people been up to? What's been in their way? How's engagement looking? And one of the things that we're working hard on right now is actually predicting retention. So we actually believe that we can predict burnout and retention at a really high rate based on messaging alone. And one of the ways we can do that is that we've learned that message volume over time is a really strong signal for whether someone is engaged and likely to stay. So if over 9 weeks, they maybe do 5% fewer messages every week, a human manager is not going to notice that, but the AI knows right away and can basically say, hey, something to look at here, something to pay attention to. And the other thing that we have in the lab right now for R&D is team dynamics. So actually being able to know how effective a team is at working together. Are there particular individuals or relationships that need attention or that are going great? Down the road, we imagine being able to ask Supermanage who should work on this next assignment, and it actually suggests a super team. So that's kind of the way these things go after you get a little bit of data fed into the model. Where we're headed from there is really, I don't know if anyone's familiar with what GitHub has done with Copilot, but essentially a Copilot for managers, right? An AI chief of staff, if you will, at your fingertips. You want to know what's going on with someone. You want to know what's in the way of the work. You want to help just, setting goals or OKRs. You need a performance review written. The tool should be able to do that, because at the end of the day, once we have the information from messaging, whether that be Teams or Slack, and from video, whether that be Zoom or another, emerging service, and a few other places, the calendar, maybe a Notion or a task manager, we can kind of see the whole picture. And once we can see the whole picture, we can start to make predictions. We can plug into things like maybe an HRIS and say, hey, next Monday is Susie's 4-year anniversary. I know that she likes this particular thing. Should I just send it to her as a little thank you and congratulations from the company? Shall I get the team to write a note to go along with that? I'll just ping everyone for you. So the future here is quite intense when you think about what an agent in the manager assistant space is capable of. It's really just a data and integrations problem at this point, and then fine tuning the model to have good judgment. We can talk a little bit about that if you ask the right questions. If you're interested, you can join the waitlist. We're much earlier than Vince, so this is still, in fact, this meeting was I want to thank you, a wonderful impetus for me to force the team to ship V0.1 of this product. So it works today because of all of you, so thank you. Yeah, 0.1 is going to be pushed out to users slowly in the next 4 weeks. If you want to jump on the wait list, of course, you can do that at supermanage.ai. If you're waiting for another tool, don't wait. You won't wait too long. We should have all the major tools done this summer. And from there, let's take a look and see this thing in action. So I'm actually going to go over to Slack. And the way this would work is that as a manager or leader, or even an HR leader, you would authorize Supermanage into Slack one time for the whole company. And once that's done, if you have that privilege, then anyone else can turn it on. And when you turn it on, you tell it what channels to listen to. So you know better than anyone as a manager which channels are where the action is. In my case here, you can see from my last brief that I ran for Kea this morning, we'll run this again. Supermanage marketing, website, in engineering, general, random, market AI. These are the things where I knew Kea was doing her work. And so that's what I told the system to listen to. And then it fetches those messages and processes them in real time on an ongoing basis. And it actually runs those messages through a couple different layers of AI to analyze what's going on with them. When I'm ready and I want a brief, or let's say that the timer had run out, I have a meeting in 1 hour with Kea and I need to know, this could happen automatically, but today we'll do it manually. Supermanage, and I want a brief, and I'm going to say it's for Kea, and then I hit enter. And what the system does, it says I'm gathering that information to make a brief for Kea, and then these are the channels and these are the dates that I'm looking at. And then I'll get a DM when it's ready, and it's ready. So in the amount of time we just sat here, Supermanage read every message that happened in the last 7 days that Kea was involved in, either as the writer or the receiver or in a thread, and ran that through 2 layers of LLM analysis and then concocted this overview. So here's Kea's report. Had a productive week, which is great. Little bit of a highlight here, maybe some challenges, and then I can look in and read further. Okay, it looks like Kea worked on marketing outreach analysis, the calendar view of sponsorships, which is really cool, and some sentiment and retention, zhuzhing. We talk a lot about zhuzhing at Supermanage. So that's pretty neat. And then challenge-wise, had a little bit of problem with analyzing our marketing outreach, research findings, and uncertainty about automated sharing. So should automated sharing of these findings be done with the team or not? And then engagement-wise, looks like she's green and green. So sentiment is green, positive sentiment overall throughout the messages. We're actually going to be tracking this with a chart going forward. So you'll see like 8 weeks of rolling data on sentiment overall. Is somebody trending up, trending down, or staying sideways? Looks like Kea had some allergy issues this week, so I'd probably mention that. And then retention is green, no signals of quitting or staying, just sort of neutral, nothing to notice on the home front there. And then suggested topics for our one-on-one. These would be the 3 things that I might want to talk about with Kea. So that's what a brief looks like right now. They get better every week as we continually tune the model and the prompts, but that is the first stopping point. And then from there, getting into probably feedback, performance reviews, and then the broader co-pilot for managers that I talked about. So I'll stop sharing and see what comes up. And I have a couple of questions for you if there are none for me.
Thanks, Aaron. We're going to kick off with Rick's question, which is, are employees skittish about AI reading Slack messaging and related sentiments? If so, how do we allay those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of the million-dollar question is, do people want this or not want it? And I think a lot of that has to do with understanding it. So what Supermanage is doing is reading public messages, not private messages. So it's not doing anything that any employee doesn't have the right to do inside these systems. It's just better at it than we are. And it is bringing to the surface what needs to happen. Now, the way we found with some of our initial testers is that they just care about how fair it is and how equitable and how focused. And the system has been coded to not be overly judgmental, to not jump to conclusions, to leave judgment in the hands of the manager, to take kind of the optimistic look at what's going on rather than a pessimistic look. So on balance right now, it seems to be pretty IC favorable. Especially for ICs that maybe have been hesitant to toot their own horn or hesitant to bring up what's really going on, what's really in the way. This is sort of a way to just put that right in front and center and make it happen. The next step we think for allaying IC concerns is that we're going to have a moment where the brief gets passed to both parties. And if there's anything about it that doesn't seem right, the IC would have an opportunity to augment that or to signal this didn't quite nail it this week before the meeting. And so that would give a little bit of additional information, both to the model to do better, but also to the manager in that relationship to make sure that it's on point. Beyond that, I think it really depends on the company and the culture. There are 3 AI tools in this meeting with us right now. So I feel like this is kind of the inevitable future, but we'll see.
Rick
Thank
has
you.
another one from Rick. What potential cybersecurity concerns are there for organizations that plug in Supermanage into their tech systems?
So right now in alpha, there are a couple, but when we actually go into production, there won't really be any because we're just connecting with the Slack or Teams API and the OpenAI model. So those things are pretty well locked down at this point. We suspect that as we move into the enterprise and get out of startups, they're actually going to want us to maintain our own model or integrate with their own model. So when that happens, we'll have to change the way the pipes work a little bit. But that's inevitable for the whole category. I mean, you know, any corporation in the world that's using ChatGPT right now is exposed to the same risk they would be on Supermanage.
Thank you.
Colette.
Thank you, Aaron. This is exciting, just like Sparkwise is very exciting. My question is more about, is there a way for management to, once you have these meetings with your team, plug in somewhere what that individual's goals are, where they want to move to, and then some sort of way to kind of check that list off and update it? And once it's, and then when it analyzes those emails, come back with that, the analysis of the emails alongside, here's where this employee wants to be, because if, say, that light is red for retention, it's like, okay, these emails are showing they're not getting the promotion that they thought they should get, but here's where they want to go, and here's now some suggestions on how we can help that.
Totally. Yeah, that's really smart, Colette. The way we're thinking about this right now is sort of twofold. One is just on a analysis basis, the next step for the retention section will be, if it is red, what does Supermanage recommend? So we can actually intuit and infer just from everything that's going on what they might like. I'll give you an example of how we do that. So right now we analyze sentiment on a per message basis and then per channel, and then it gets rolled up. But imagine, for example, if I could tell you that this employee in the design department has better sentiment working on UX than UI across both conversations, threads, and channels. Now we have a clue to talk about, hey, it seems like you're just a happier camper when you're doing UX and not UI work. Is that a career path, right? Is that something that we want to lean harder on? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we need to be in events class on UI because you're actually just overwhelmed, and that's the other direction to go. So I think we're sort of playing with what those recommendations look like. Meanwhile, I think there's an argument to be made that if we can plug into whatever tooling or documentation you're using for goal setting, then the system can also start to steer along those paths as well. So right now it's like eating an elephant, like it's so much bigger than our mouths, but we're just sort of going like one little bite at a time to keep moving forward.
Okay, Emily asks, you mentioned this will be available for other systems such as Teams. Are you seeing any challenges in working with those systems versus Slack?
Sure. Don't get me started. The reality is the more default open a system is, the better it is for AI. So if the system is default closed and locked down, that makes things harder. Slack, when you open a new channel, is an open channel unless you make it private. Teams works the other way. And there's reasons for that you can agree or disagree with, but the punchline is that it's a little bit harder to find what we want to feed the system in a place like Teams. And so the setup might be a little bit more elaborate for a user, but that's the nature of the beast. Often we find that organizations that use Teams use it because it's free, and they also do a lot of email and a lot of texting and a lot of other things on top of that. So we might be able to plug into other data sources as well to kind of round out what's missing. But at the end of the day, the companies that will get the most out of tools like this, not just Supermanage, but all AI tools, are the ones that are the most open and transparent. So that'll just be true for forever for us.
Another question from Emily. Did any of your testers see a disconnect between what's out in the public channels versus private ones that caused some of the manager one-on-ones to show favorability for retention or outcomes?
Yeah, so I mean, right now we're just at the point of, is the AI describing reality accurately based on the information we have? But there's also, to your point, this sort of the shadow part of the organization in DMs. And right now it looks like that's about 40% of all messages for a healthy company and more for an unhealthy company across the whole Slack system. So we're 60%. If you're 60% public, that's, by default, that's pretty good. And there is obviously a lot going on in those channels that we don't get to see or know about. However, there are these other subtle signals that we get to see that even though we can't see those DMs, we can see the signs that those DMs are negative. So if we see a sign that that volume is going down, like I talked about, that may be a sign that they're actually retreating to DMs to have conversations about their frustrations or challenges. And so that's the retreat you're seeing, not necessarily a volume change overall. The other thing is that sentiment is really hard to control all the time. So as much as we all think of ourselves as these wonderful performers who are always putting on a professional face, over 8 weeks, I can see incredibly subtle changes in your attitude and interactions with a tool like this that you may not even be aware of. And just presenting them to you presents a career development opportunity. So if somebody says, hey, I want to chat with Supermanage about my own career development, we're into that. We really like that. And you can say, how am I showing up? How am I presenting right now? Where does it, what does it look like to see me in the workplace? And what ideas or advice do you have for me to kind of move to that next level, or maybe compare me to someone that I look up to and tell me, well, what do you see differently when you look at Vince versus Aaron? Now, how can I draft on that? How can I learn from that and step up? So lots of fun stuff there, but it's it's messy.
Let us, as it pertains to the business model, will this be a tech that has a free version like Jotform or Asana and then scale up at a cost?
Yeah, so right now, this is something I need to talk about with Gale, but right now we're thinking about making the brief part of Supermanage free for the foreseeable future for two reasons. One, the market right now is extremely uphill for instituting new software. I think most of the CHROs that I'm friends with do not have a massive budget for signing up new software. Everybody's cutting down. But something like this can be useful just to one manager in one role. And so we want them to be able to turn it on and get that value right away. I think when you start thinking about kind of Supermanage Plus, like all the other things it can do in that co-pilot for managers lane, that's where we might see a pro version that has a price point to it. So we'll probably have something that's free for one team, for one set of direct reports for a long time, maybe forever, and then a premium version that does a lot more and is a lot more valuable.
Aaron, I agree that is the right approach for HR solutions. A lot of people have tested many different things, and I think that getting your software in the hands of the users is more important than anything, especially moving forward. I think we're going to see the SaaS model start to creatively adjust as we move forward. So that'll be
Yeah,
fun.
we want one manager to be able to tell another manager or even their own direct report who is a manager to be like, hey, I got a secret weapon here. It's 2 clicks to turn it on, literally. It's free. Go do it, right? Why wouldn't you want that insight? Why wouldn't you want that that extra gasoline in the tank? So
If Fred has a question, will Supermanage be able to assess climate and culture shifts at some stage at both the team and organizational levels?
that's a great question and a good idea that I will steal liberally. I think the reality is that is purely about penetration. So if we have one team out of 1,000 using the tool, that'll be really hard. But if we have 50 or 60 or 70% coverage inside an organization, it's actually going to get super easy. So that would be something, you know, if I had access to 100 teams in one shop today, I could probably code that up over a weekend.
One last question? Any burning question for Aaron? Well, thank you all. I have included a link to the survey.